is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Wednesday in October, 2 days away from Halloween and 1 day away from the Ravens matchup against the Dolphins in Miami. We are going to preview that matchup and talk about the expected return of quarterback Lamar Jackson, give you our predictions, and break this matchup down from every angle. All that and much, much more. But first, quick word from our sponsors.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, we are live on Facebook, X, YouTube, and now Instagram, Balt Banner Sports. We're trying it out. Let us know what you think. Like, rate, review, subscribe anywhere that you get your podcasts. Write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. We got one recently, Jonas, from Andrew Casantino. He says, there is no better Ravens podcast than The Banner. The reporting is always objective, level-headed, and informative. They perfectly thread the needle of being neither homers nor haters. Moreover, Paul and Jonas have undeniable chemistry that makes the podcast super enjoyable. Jonas, do you agree that we have undeniable chemistry?
Yes, our chemistry is undeniable. Is all chemistry necessarily good? Is that the implication here? Can people have chemistry and
it's bad
bad chemistry? Yeah,
maybe that could be a thing. I mean, there's a disconnect often between wide receivers and quarterbacks. I'd say that's bad chemistry. I think you and I are like Tom Brady and Wes Welker, though. We find each other, you know, or Gronk.
which one is which? I would love to be Gronk.
That's for the listeners to decide. We also haven't done, by the way, our Who's Got It Better Than award or our word of the day in like 3 podcast episodes. But I think if the Ravens can retroactively alter a practice report, then I think we can retroactively hand out our Who's Got It Better Than to Tyler Huntley last week for his performance against the Chicago Bears. Also, our word of the day from last week should be retroactive because of the changes to the injury, the practice report, I should say, the practice participation of one Lamar Jackson. Shouldn't be any controversy about that this week, Jonas, because Lamar Jackson, full participant this week. He spoke to the media yesterday at the Castle. He is expected to play in Miami, in his home state of Florida. Jonas, this just makes all the difference. What did you learn from Lamar Jackson speaking to the media yesterday?
A whole lot. It was
first time in a long time we'd heard from him.
I think I counted 27 questions in 9 minutes. So a lot to ask. Obviously, he's not going to be as expansive, as verbose as, say, Marlon Humphrey or Kyle Hamilton. But I think
verbose word of the day.
I think for the most part, we got most of what we needed to figure out. Not a lot of clarity on how the injury happened. He said he's just looking forward. He said that he wasn't hurt before, which I think some fans were speculating about. You know, you go back to that Ed Oliver hit in week 1 that left him feeling cramping up. And we've seen the struggles in escaping pressure in the weeks that followed, which of course has to correlate with the high sack rate that we're going to talk about today. But, you know, Marlon Humphrey said that Lamar was the guy who took the games out of the locker room. Lamar confirmed it. I didn't know that a player has that kind of power over the decor as Lamar. But, you know, as John Harbaugh said, like, Lamar kind of does what he does. And obviously it was pretty funny to see online, like the Gordon Ramsay, oh dear, / oh, you're a dumbass comparison of when Ravens fans thought that John Harbaugh was the one who had taken all of the fun games, the ping pong table, the cornhole, the basketball hoop out of the locker room, because that was what was reported by the Baltimore Sun, citing anonymous players. Ravens fans were up in arms about just like, what does this coach think he's doing? But now that it's Lamar, people have a little bit more grace for him being the one calling the shots. And obviously that just goes to the deeper discussion of like what it means to be a fan in 2025, and whether fan bases are more comprised of people rooting for individual players or certain teams, like where their allegiances to are. And obviously there's the whole issue of just fans being fed up with John Harbaugh that we shouldn't discount. But it was really interesting to see just how bipolar of a reaction that provoked.
Yeah, the initial report about the games being taken out of the locker room came from the Baltimore Sun. They initially cited sources that said that it was the coaches that made that decision. And then it turns out it is, as Marlon Humphrey would put it, a top 2 player on the Ravens. The top 2 player being Lamar Jackson. I think fans, were ecstatic to hear that, because they said our quarterback is locked in. He's somebody who doesn't want this season to slip by, and this is his call to really call for professionalism in the locker room. Ultimately, a lot of these ancillary stuff around the team, where the games are in the locker room, how many games they're being played, it is secondary to who's out there playing and how well they are playing. So, obviously mountains being made out of molehills there. But let's talk about just how good he was before the injury to his hamstring against the Chiefs, because I think it gets forgotten just how elite Lamar Jackson was playing. Coming into right before his injury, he was completing 72% of his passes. He had 10 touchdowns to 1 interception. He had a 131 quarterback rating. He had 9.1 yards per attempt. All of those numbers would be career highs if you stretch them out over the course of the season. The biggest issue, though, as we all know, and it reared its ugly head, especially in that loss to the Lions, was his sack percentage would also be a career high over the course of a full season, 14%. And Jonas, there was a lot of talk after that Lions game and a little bit after the Chiefs game, although everybody was just reeling from the sheer number of injuries in that game in Kansas City, about the new way that the Lions were structuring their defense to face Lamar Jackson, with this QB spy and great coverage down the field and just a 4-man rush with that QB spy. Do you feel like let's reopen that conversation. Do you feel like that was just a blip on the radar, that the Ravens just happened to face a very good Detroit Lions defense who knew exactly how to face Lamar? Or do you think that that's going to be something that's going to plague him all season long if he continues to see that kind of defense?
I mean, we saw the Chiefs imitate it, so I think we're going to probably see it. We're going to see copycats for the rest of the season. Miami's got a pretty high blitz rate. I think they're like top 5 in the NFL, sending 5 or more guys after the quarterback like 35% of the time. But Anthony Weaver, obviously familiarity with the Ravens, familiarity with Lamar. I think he's aware that sometimes he can maybe get in his own head when he sees certain looks that are frustrating to him. You go back to 2021 and that cover zero, calamity against Miami, different defense, different coordinator. But, Lamar, I think a lot of coordinators are asking him to prove that he can beat certain defenses before they move on and try something new. And Lamar, for to his credit, usually figures things out and usually figures things out pretty quickly. So I think we'll probably see some spies. You hope that the offensive line is better. You hope that the interior protection is better, so that you can give him the kind of time that he needs to go through his reads and find guys open in these zones. Like there was a chart that came out right around when Lamar got hurt, where he was like being flushed from the pocket because of pressure higher than anyone in the NFL. And obviously he's able to escape it because he's Lamar, but at a certain point there are just diminishing returns, and you can't stay in the pocket, can't find your first read, second read, and get the ball out. So we'll see. This isn't a great Miami defense, as we'll talk about, but I didn't really think that the Lions pass rush would be all that effective either. And they put Lamar through hell. So it's going to be interesting to see just what kind of answers the Ravens have, what kind of answers Lamar has. He said yesterday that he doesn't really expect any rust because that's what practice is for. But I think there's a difference. There's a difference in the physicality and even the speed of practice, on a Tuesday compared to what you're going to get on a Thursday in prime time, with your hometown crowd roaring for you. It's just a different beast.
Yeah, it has made me appreciate this, just how much these players put their bodies through in order to turn around from a Sunday game to a Thursday night game. I mean, the game is already here. It feels like the Ravens just played their game against the Bears, and it's utterly ridiculous how quickly they have to turn things around and get ready. And that's part of the reason that John Harbaugh acknowledged that Lamar Jackson did not play against the Chicago Bears, even though you asked the week before if it was a factor, the fact that they were playing 2 games in a 5-day span. John Harbaugh said, we're not worried about that. We're taking it one game at a time. Well, after Tyler Huntley got the start and won against the Bears, John Harbaugh said, yeah, we took that into account. And it makes sense. You don't want Lamar Jackson taking a beating back there on Sunday against the Bears with a not 100% hamstring and then flying to Miami and doing it all over again 5 days later. So very difficult, situation to try to put your quarterback in. And that's why the Ravens specifically did not. But now they're looking at a 100% Lamar Jackson, and they're looking at an offense that has a lot more pieces in place than they did back when Lamar Jackson was under center. You're talking about Patrick Ricard is back as your fullback. Isaiah Likely is back and should be healthier and have less rust. You're talking about a 2-5 Ravens team that has a very soft second half of the schedule. Jonas, you were covering the 2018 Ravens. Why were you getting flashbacks to that team when you were thinking about the kind of run that this team can go on in the second half?
It's pretty surprising, some of the similarities, just in terms of where that team was. Obviously, right now you have Lamar coming back from an injury. In 2018, it was Lamar stepping up to the scene, being more than just a cameo player, a bit role haver in that Joe Flacco offense. Joe hurts his hip. The Ravens need Lamar to come in. He gets promoted over the bye in week 10 to that starter role. The Ravens are 4-5. They're flailing. They're coming off a bad home loss to the Steelers. Looking back at the reporting around that time, they had a 36% chance of making the playoffs, which is right around where the Ravens were before their game against the Bears. Obviously, those odds have shot up since that win. But the Ravens, over the back half of that schedule, had an easy schedule. That was a pretty forgiving slate of opponents that they were going through. They won 6 of 7. Lamar really steps up. The run game finally, takes shape. They completely changed the offense to go from the kind of pro style, spread them out offense that Joe was running to the more college style, option heavy offense that Lamar had run at Louisville, and it worked with great success. They win every game but the one game in Kansas City where Patrick Mahomes hits Tyreek Hill on that incredible scramble cross-field throw that forces overtime. The Ravens lose. They end up, winning. They end up going to win the division, making the playoffs. It sets up the, nice little run that the Ravens have had with Lamar since that 2018 season. And, obviously here the Ravens are only 2-5, but a lot of the smart people in the betting industry and the analytics industry also know how the Ravens as pretty neck and neck now with the Steelers because of their own schedule and Pittsburgh's relatively tough schedule at coming back and winning this division. So it's interesting that even though it's not a totally apples to apples comparison, because I don't think this Ravens defense is as good as that 2018 Ravens defense was, which by the end of the year was allowing less than 200 passing yards per game. But at least Lamar has that familiarity of stepping into a situation midseason, knowing that it is do or die, as John Harbaugh told Lamar, and as Lamar kind of recounted yesterday. There is this understanding that your back's against the wall and you have to do things a certain way, and you can't have the kind of screw ups that the Ravens have had in years past when they've had more talented teams and dropped dumb games after, week after blowing out one of the best teams in the NFL. They have to be on their P's and Q's every single week. They have to just be the best versions of themselves, because if they don't, and if they drop dumb games, then they're not going to do what the 2018 Ravens did, which was come back and really set themselves up for a nice late season run and a potential playoff shakeup. So it just something that kind of occurred to me the other day, that Lamar has been here before, even though he's at very, very different points in his careers, and the two teams that are the points of these comparison are very, very different.
Yeah, and you don't want to start counting chickens before they hatch, but obviously the schedule is laid out for the Ravens to go on a run here, because at Miami, at Minnesota, at Cleveland, yes, that's 3 straight games on the road, but you're talking about a one of the easier slate of opponents that you can ask for. And also, you're talking about a team that is dramatically healthier than they were just a few weeks ago. A perfect participation at Ravens practice the other day. Jonas, did you ever get perfect participation in middle school or grade school?
No. I was too invested in taking mental health days when I didn't want to turn in a homework assignment that I'd neglected to do.
Mental health days. Wow. I don't even know if I knew what that was when I was a kid. That was just a fake sick day, I think is what you meant.
Right. I think, it wasn't that hard to fake vomit and just, show it to a parent and be like, oh, I don't feel so good. And then, they believe in you because you're a good student otherwise.
Yeah. Fake vomit is one way to do it. No fake vomit for the Ravens, but they did have Ronnie Stanley still dealing with his ankle injury. Just seems like that's going to be a thing all season long. Limited participant in practice. But other than that, Jonas, this is a very, very healthy team right now coming out of the bye, with the exception of one guy that we haven't talked about in a few weeks because he's been out, played just 3 games so far this season. That's Broderick Washington. According to John Harbaugh, undergoing surgery and his timetable for recovery is unclear. So he did not say whether it was season ending or not, but he was placed on IR at the end of September with his ankle injury. So certainly a blow to the defensive line if they're never able to get Broderick Washington back, somebody that they thought might be back at some point soon after the 4-week stay on the IR. They're facing a Dolphins team right now, Jonas, that is coming off a dominant win over the Kirk Cousins-led Atlanta Falcons, 34-0. They had been awful so far this season, to the point where I thought their head coach might have been gone before that game. I thought he would be out the door. In rewatching that game, was that an instance of the Miami Dolphins finally figuring things out and clicking, or was that an instance of, boy, this Atlanta team is not good?
Yeah, I think it's more door number 2. Just Kirk Cousins at quarterback, no Drake London at wide receiver. The pass rush couldn't really do a whole lot. Credit to Miami, as we're about to talk about it. Their defense, which was downright dreadful for the first 6 weeks of the season, has turned things around these past 2 weeks. But you wonder whether that's a function of facing Dylan Gabriel and then Kirk Cousins, or they've actually hit on something that's more sustainable. But they held the Falcons to 213 total yards of offense. I think they held them under 50 yards rushing, which is a big win when it's Bijan Robinson and a pretty good Atlanta offensive line. The week before, even though they got blown the heck out 31-6 by Cleveland, they still held that Browns offense to 206 total yards. So setting the stage potentially for some Thursday night weirdness, but it's going to be interesting because obviously, Anthony Weaver has that experience against the Ravens. Not super recently. He was only on staff as recently as 2023. But, the Miami's 2-6 for a reason. The Ravens are 2-5 for a reason. Whether one of those is more misleading than the other, we'll see. But if John Harbaugh was very, very, had a lot of praise for how Miami was playing, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and for good reason, because anytime you can hold a team under 215 yards of total offense, you're doing something right.
Yeah, Anthony Weaver, a lot of people assumed when Mike Macdonald got the head coaching job in Seattle that Weaver was going to be the next guy in line, that he was going to take over as defensive coordinator. He departs for Miami. He had, I believe, an assistant head coach title added to him, by the way, the year before. So everything seemed to be trending towards him getting that job. Ravens go with Zach Orr instead, and the Miami defense has not been very good under Zach Orr, or under Anthony Weaver, I should say. So a lot of Ravens fans are having, second thoughts, or hindsight is 2020 about, we should have hired Mike Macdonald and let go of John Harbaugh after the 2023 season, which was never going to happen, as we've said on this podcast. But if you're one of the people that's saying we should have hired Anthony Weaver as defensive coordinator instead of Zach Orr, the results certainly are not on your side. In terms of Thursday night matchups, Jonas, they have not been particularly kind to the road teams, and it's for obvious reasons. It's a short week. You're turning around very quickly, and you have to go down to Miami and play a game 4 days after you just played one. Road teams so far this season are 2-5 on Thursday night football, and we've gotten some weird results there too. There have been some weird, underdogs who have won some games on Thursday nights. And you don't like that when you're playing a Thursday night game the day before Halloween. Could ask for some spooky weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest surprising, the most surprising stat of this little section is the Ravens are perfect at home on Thursday Night Football under John Harbaugh, 11-0, but they are 2-5. Or I guess no, so they would be 9-0 at home on Thursday Night Football under John Harbaugh, but they're just 2-5 on the road. And you think of some of those games that have been just awful games to watch. Like it is the 2021 loss to the Dolphins when it's Brian Flores versus Lamar that stands out. And obviously Lamar's come a long way since that game against the Blitz, but that is just symptomatic of the kinds of games that you see. It just things can snowball off on you really quickly. You think back a couple weeks ago, it's Joe Flacco, his first start against the Bengals, first start for the Bengals against the Steelers, and he just completely tears that Pittsburgh secondary up. So it's a little bit interesting to me to see some people picking the Ravens to blow this team out when I don't think they're when they're supremely more talented than them in a lot of different cases. And also just the fact that Lamar's playing for the first time in a while. He's going to be playing with the pressure of his Broward County family coming out to see him, and just it's tough to get ready and get all your pistons firing on such a short week of practice. I don't think the Chicago game was especially physical for the Ravens. It's not like they're really licking their wounds, but I don't know if their depth is so supremely good that if a couple of guys get hurt, then this game just could get completely wonky.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it a couple different ways for Lamar, though. He could be looking to show off in front of his friends and family when he goes back to Miami and be playing heightened level. Let's talk about the Dolphins offense against this Ravens defense. This is a game, we've said it about 80 times this season, but this is a game where the Ravens defense needs to get pressure on Tua Tagovailoa because he struggles mightily against pressure. This version of Tua is immobile. He is, skittish in the pocket. He throws a lot of interceptions. He makes bad decisions. He takes a lot of sacks that he shouldn't. And this is an offensive line that can be had. The Ravens got their first sack from Mike Green, the second-round rookie, last week. He played a whopping 80-some% of the snaps last week. So they are asking him to do a lot more than they were expecting to be asking of him. Could be getting Carl Lawson in this game, somebody that they signed off the street last week who was not ready to play, and that's that game against the Bears. 32 career sacks. He had 5 sacks last year with Dallas, so he still might have a little bit of something left in the tank. They just need warm bodies for that position, but they have to get home. They have to force pressure onto Tagovailoa in this game, and it starts with the guys up front.
Yeah, and the problem for Miami is the problem that it's been for the past couple of years. It's just been that awful offensive line where if Tua doesn't have the time to or can't get the ball out on that first or second read, then he's just going to go into chaos mode, and he has putting the ball in harm's way too often. He's got the second highest turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL this year, according to PFF, behind only Spencer Rattler, who, of course, was just benched in New Orleans. It just hasn't been the kind of year that we expected for Tua, and obviously losing Tyreek Hill has been a big part of that, but fewest passing yards per game of his career high sack rate, career low success rate, career low yards per attempt. It has just been a real struggle. And, they have explosive pieces, certainly, Devon Achane averaging 5 yards per carry. He's got 5 runs of at least 20 yards this year. Jalen Waddle already over 500 yards receiving, but there's just not a lot of depth. There's not a lot of stability. There's not a lot of, reliable building blocks in this offense. And that's why obviously Mike McDaniel is in such hot water there, because it's just like, what are you doing if you can't help lift this offense to the kind of levels it needs to be? So you mentioned the pass rush. Miami just does not do a good job on early downs. They have almost 52% of their downs reach third down, a league high 30% reach third and long. So the Ravens should have plenty of opportunities to get to the passer. But, you do wonder if it is just one third down conversion after another, and Zach Orr gets a little itchy, a little trigger happy, and he starts to send the blitz We know that, Miami has a very creative, effective screen game, at least it has in years past. And with guys like Waddle and Achan, it doesn't take long for those guys to get up to top speed. And if you're blitzing six and get hit with a screen pass at just the right time, like we saw Chicago, you know, audible into that screen pass on Sunday against the Ravens versus a blitz, then that's an easy explosive play, and maybe a 20-yard run turns, or a 20-yard catch and run turns into a 60-yard touchdown because you just get burned at the wrong time. So this is a game where hopefully you can create pressure with just 4 or 5 guys and not really needing to reach too deep into the bag of numbers to get home, because chances are that if you just do a good job of keeping what's in front of you, Tua is going to make mistakes, and Lord knows the Ravens need turnovers to kind of keep their defense propped up if they can't do a good job of just staying behind the sticks.
Yeah, and this is where the impact of Roquan Smith was felt last week against the Bears, and where his absence was certainly felt in the games that he missed, because Trenton Simpson and Teddy Buchanan have their flaws, and they're certainly super athletic, but there were so many times when they had to play significant snaps that they would just get wiped out of plays entirely, just walk into blocks, a lot of second-level runs that would just be broken off for 20, 30 yards that shouldn't have because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Roquan Smith came back last week and immediately made an impact, led the team in tackles. He just is, when he is healthy and he is right, he is still one of the better linebackers, inside linebackers in football. And that's where his impact is going to be felt. In the secondary, Jonas, we know Nate Wiggins has been begging Chuck Pagano, secondary coach, to get matchups against the top wide receivers on other teams. Would be Jalen Waddle with Tyreek Hill out. I won't lie, he got that key interception that really sealed the game, and he deserves plenty of flowers for that in the second half against the Bears. But the first half was not as good. He overcame a very difficult first half where a lot of plays he was getting picked on by Rome Odunze. How do you expect this matchup to go? And do you expect Nate Wiggins to once again get the premier matchup of Jalen Waddle?
I mean, I think we'll definitely see it on some obvious passing downs. It was interesting listening to the Athletic Football Show this morning. They said that the Ravens, maybe this was a one-game plan because of just how impressive Chicago's rushing attack had been coming into that one. But, in years past, under Mike Macdonald, under Zach Orr, the Ravens have typically played with light boxes. So, fewer guys in the box than teams have blockers. But the Ravens really switched that up on Sunday. They had a lot more heavy boxes than they normally do. So you have more defenders in the box than are accounted for with blockers. And you saw that with just how effectively they blunted that Chicago rushing attack. I think the running backs combined for 79 yards total. But because of that strategic decision, you are leaving guys more on an island in the secondary. And that's fine if you trust those guys to hang up in coverage. And, Marlon Humphrey did a relatively good job. Kyle Hamilton did a relatively good job. Nate Wiggins had a rough first 20 minutes before really bouncing back strong in the second half. But that is just going to be something to kind of keep our eyes on going forward, especially when it is, like, let's say a game against the Bengals and the Ravens run defense is not in a good place. Like, are they going to put their hand on the scale more towards the run defense and say, we trust Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey and Cheeto and maybe Jair Alexander to stick with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in coverage, man-on-man, one-on-one? Or are they going to have to dial it back and, do a little bit more shell coverage where, you are having these guys play soft zones and not asking them to be too aggressive and in these guys' face? So that's just something to kind of keep to monitor, like how much actually are the Ravens going to commit to their run defense, and what kind of effect does that have on these cornerbacks who want to play man-to-man coverage against the best wide receivers on those teams. But it might be asking a little bit too much of them to play it every down, because, as John Harbaugh said, playing man-to-man, it really does it requires a lot of cardiovascular ability. It's tough to run with these guys every single play, as opposed to just, doing zone drops and just kind of playing defense with your eyes. So it's gonna be interesting to see, but obviously Waddle versus Wiggins would be a really, really fun matchup to cover.
Yeah, and that's especially why Tyreek Hill not being in there. I mean, he's just a nightmare to cover in general, because he's so speedy and can take the top off of defense so easily and quickly that I feel like the Ravens' new safety look with Alohi Gilman in there might be able to handle him, but still, it obviously helps the Ravens that Tyreek will not be in there. All right, other side of the ball, Jonas. Ravens might be getting a preview of some names that are going to be on the trade market because there are a couple edge rushers for Miami that some national reporters have dangled out there as possible trade candidates. Talk about edge rushers Bradley Chubb, who's got 4 sacks so far this season, and Jalen Phillips, who's got a pair of sacks in the final year of his rookie contract. Could we be seeing one or more guys, I'd say one, that on Thursday that could be playing for the Ravens before the trade deadline next Tuesday?
It's definitely possible. And obviously Eric DeCosta is going to be at this game. He's going to get a sense for how they move, what kind of pop they bring, what kind of teammates they are, before the game, during the game, all that stuff. It's good to be on the scene, getting a first person perspective of just what these guys are like on a team that obviously seems like it's headed nowhere fast. So we'll see. I mean, I think someone like Jalen Phillips would probably be a little bit more available, I guess. It's tough to say. He's in the final year of his rookie contract. He's got more pressures than Chubb, even though the sack numbers are there, aren't there. I think ESPN has him like as a top 10 guy in a run stop win rate for the edge rushers, which is obviously something that the Ravens need while Tavius Robinson is out. It's just tough to expect Kyle Van Noy and Mike Green, David Ajabo to be relatively solid run defenders. We don't know what Carl Lawson is going to bring there. Excuse me. So it's going to be interesting just to see how those guys play, and then of course what kind of interest the Ravens have in those two. The trade deadline is coming up on us. It's going to be gone at 4 p.m. Tuesday, I believe. So not a whole lot of time for the Ravens to find a supreme edge rusher. And of course, they're not the only team in the market for edge rusher depth. The Chiefs are in a much better position than the Ravens, but if you don't trust Chris Jones to hold up over the length of this season, or if you feel like you need a more stable number 2 behind George Karlaftis, then certainly they're in a position where they might want to make a move and might be more interested in making a move than the Ravens. But I just think that this pass rush is just still very, very feeble for the Ravens. And at a certain point, you're going to have to take a chance that bringing a guy into Baltimore is going to do more for him. There's the possibility of him just finding a new gear because of coaching or culture or whatever than what he's been doing in his previous stop. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Deontay Johnson didn't work. Marcus Peters, it did work for a little bit. But that is just, that's why you need to do your homework. That's why you need to figure out just how much these guys are worth. And, as Ozzie Newsome always said, right player, right price.
Yeah, both those guys, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, significant injury risk. Both those guys have suffered a lot of injuries over the course of their careers. Jalen Phillips played just 4 games last year, 8 the year before, and Bradley Chubb missed an entire season with a torn ACL. So that'll certainly affect their value. But those 2 guys are solid. This is a defense, though, that can very much be had, Jonas. This is a defense that, in a lot of ways, was worse through the first 6 weeks than the Ravens defense, which, as we all know, struggled mightily. Do you peg it all on the secondary? Do you peg it all on scheme? What do you think the issues have been for this Dolphins defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a very talented defense, straight up. I mean, I think there was hopes that the pass rush could be able to carry this defense because you'd invested in Jalen Phillips, you'd invested in Bradley Chubb, obviously Zach Sealer, former Raven. I think he had 11 sack season last year. I don't think he has a single sack this year. They used a first round pick on Kenneth Grant, the big nose tackle out of Michigan, who's been up and down like you usually see for these first year interior defensive linemen. But yeah, it just they traded for Minka Fitzpatrick, but that hasn't really done anything to stabilize their defense. It's just a leaky defense. Opponents are scoring over 50% of their drives, which is second to worst in the league for the Dolphins. They were second to last in EPA per play, second to last in success rate over the first 6 weeks, only behind the Cowboys in both categories. Obviously, like we said, they've really picked things up the past 2 weeks, starting with that run defense, but it still is a group that I think is vulnerable to a team that has as much talent and as good a quarterback as Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Jonas, did you want to play a real or fake game with some of these names in the Dolphins
Yeah.
secondary?
This is. I wanted to bring back the game that we played 2 years ago
We've
before
played it a
the
few times.
we played it with, I think, Baltimore city congressmen or local Baltimore politicians before that game against the Cardinals 2 years ago, I think.
That's
And
right.
that Cardinals defense actually acquitted itself quite well. The Ravens really didn't have a whole lot of success until late against that Cardinals defense. But this is a kind of no-name Dolphins defense. It's other than Minka Fitzpatrick, not a lot of brand name value. So I just wanted to test your bona fides about how well you know
Please.
these guys. You told me off air that you know the first one. Is Storm Duck on the Dolphins secondary, or is Storm Logan on the Dolphins
It's Storm
secondary?
Duck. I mean, I know that because that's one of the most legendary names in football right now. Storm Duck. It's outstanding.
Do you know who Storm Logan is?
No idea. Is that a real person?
The soap opera character that Storm Duck was named after.
No way.
Yeah. All right. Next up,
That's awesome.
Chase Cope or Dante Trader. Which one is the real member of the Dolphins secondary?
Dante Trader sounds like a name I've heard.
Okay, you're correct. He's a former Maryland safety. I think it was a 6th or 7th round pick of the Dolphins. I brought in Chase Cope because he was a teammate of Dante Trader's on the Maryland lacrosse team in 2021 that Dante Trader played for. So I wanted to see if I could throw you with that. And this one is a little bit of a change up because, I don't want to give the game away, but Juju Brents or Cam Smith, which is the real member of the Dolphins secondary?
Cam Smith.
And so Juju Brents was taken before Cam Smith in the 2023 draft. Cam Smith they're both second round picks. Juju Brents was a second round pick of the Colts, I believe. Cam Smith was second round pick of Miami. He was so bad that he got cut after 2 years. So they signed Juju Brents, who was also so bad in Indy that he got cut. So he is now, I believe, the starting cornerback for this Miami secondary. So it's a real who's who of guys that you probably don't know and probably don't think too highly of. It's just a lot of dudes around Minka Fitzpatrick. And that was real or fake for this Dolphins secondary.
Should I do the same with you and run through the 19 pitchers that pitched in the World Series Game 3 in that 18-inning affair?
I didn't know many of I actually watched up until I didn't watch all of the game, but I watched.
You can't. That ended at like 3 a.m.
I know.
You watched baseball?
I think I tapped out at like 1:30 just because it was. What else was on that night? You know.
You just could have been watching the back of your eyelids. I mean, you could have been sleeping instead of watching a ridiculously long baseball game.
Well, there were a couple sequences where it's like guys got into scoring position on second and third base. I was like, oh, this would be fun to watch a walk-off hit, and then no one came through.
Did it leave you with a better impression of the sport of baseball than you had previously had, or a worse one because you didn't see any scoring in the extra innings?
I didn't watch the early parts of the game, so I just basically am like the worst person at your office party who only watches the fun parts of sporting tournaments,
Jonas,
sporting events or tournaments.
You watch baseball. That's all I can ask for, and that's a real joy.
Baseball.
You are a closet baseball fan. Don't try to hide it. All right, we are going to give you our predictions on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, to be clear, we're giving you our predictions for the Ravens and the Dolphins on Thursday night and not Game 5 of the World Series tonight. Jonas, why don't you hit us with your score prediction for this game?
Yeah, I've got Ravens, I guess not covering the spread, but still winning by touchdown, 24-17. I just think there should be enough advantages on all sides of this game to account for any Thursday night weirdness that we might get. I do think we'll see some rust from Lamar. I do think that this secondary, this Miami pass rush, which has some guys, can get another good game going, can maybe limit this Ravens run game, which would obviously, you know, we saw a lot of 3 and outs from this Ravens offense, even when Lamar was at the controls. It was explosive plays and leading to touchdowns, or was 3 and outs. And I just wonder whether we'll see that same kind of game from this Ravens offense with Lamar coming back. I know he said he's 100%, but for me, I'm kind of I'm in see it to believe it mode with that. And I just think this Ravens defense, even though I don't think it's all the way back to its 2024 glory, nor do I think it will ever get back to its 2024 glory, I just think that it's good enough to keep this Miami offense off track. And we know that Tua, likes to throw where he's sure guys will be. He's very trusting that guys will be there. And if this Ravens defense with Zach Orr can change the picture enough with him and get him to double clutch or just throw into spots that are suddenly occupied by, a linebacker who's rotating back, or a safety who's moving up, then that could be a potential, game-changing play. So I think Lamar is just going to play the cleaner game, but I do think it's going to be a relatively competitive game, just because it's really tough to, I think, have awesome comprehensive victories in short weeks like this.
I'm leaning more towards the blowout just because I am going back to the talent disparity here on both the offense and the defense. I'm going Ravens 33 and Dolphins 20. The Ravens last week against the Bears said that they wanted to script plays. They wanted to get Keaton Mitchell involved in the game plan in areas that he had not been previously involved at all this season. And it worked out because he ended up, surprise, surprise, showing that burst, showing that athleticism that seemingly nobody else has. And he proved the Ravens coaches right, but also the Ravens coaches late, because they did not script those kind of plays for him in the first several weeks of the season. While they're at it, while they're looking at areas that they can improve and guys that they need to get going, I would throw Isaiah Likely in that category. Somebody who has struggled mightily this season, has just 5 catches on 26 targets in his 4 games this season. Lamar loves to find him. I mean, in the same way that he loves to use Mark Andrews as a get out of jail free card, as a escape hatch, I think that he also uses Isaiah Likely in that same way. And I think that the Ravens coaches are going to script some more plays to get Isaiah Likely going, because it is utterly absurd how underutilized he has been so far this season. I expect him to go off, if not this week, then soon. And I've got the Ravens winning by 13 points. You excited to enjoy Miami, Jonas? Oh, go ahead.
And Isaiah has had, well, I guess it was one really good game against the Dolphins, but that Lamar Jackson perfect passer rating game from what, was that last year, 2 years ago? But that was I think I'm thinking of the right game. But Isaiah Likely over his career, 2 games against the Dolphins, 6 catches on 8 targets, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. So on a per game basis, he's done really, really well against Miami. Obviously, a small sample size. I believe it's a different defensive coordinator now. I think that was 2 years ago, because I think that was the final stretch of Vic Fangio before he left for Philly. But we know that Isaiah, when he's gone against the Dolphins, has had some really nice games. So this could be the one. This could also be the game where Mark Andrews, in the least least anticipated record-breaking performance that I can remember. I think he's 40 yards away from breaking the Ravens' all-time receiving record for total yardage as a receiver. And it just feels like no one's talking about that, because no one's really talking about him or Isaiah Likely or just the Ravens tight ends in general, which is a pretty big surprise, because we were all talking about just how talented this group was, and just hasn't really come together. So kind of a weird year for both. And if the Ravens get a breakthrough performance from one of those guys, then it'll just add one more dimension to this offense.
There are more pressing storylines. There have been a lot of storylines so far this season, probably too many. And so I think sometimes those positive storylines get lost when you're at 2-5. Jonas, do you have any fun Miami plans?
Nope. I'll be getting out of there pretty quickly.
You're probably going to spend exactly 24 hours in Miami and then just hit the road, because that's how you do things. Whether you're in Buffalo or Miami, you just refuse to enjoy the sights and sounds of
I contribute very little to the local economy. I
um,
spent all my money in Maryland like a true patriot.
That's wow. Good for you. Buy local. You can read all of our predictions on thebanner.com, or you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Banner.
We have plenty more coverage for you there as well as we get ready for this game on Thursday night. And then after that, we'll start talking trade deadline and preview some names that could be coming to Baltimore. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you late on Friday morning, probably around